Hey, Manuela. It's great to have you on the podcast. So we're just going to start off with some lightning questions as we kind of get things started. First thing is in doing some research on you, I came across the concept of a hype document. I never heard of
hmm
this kind of before. What is a hype document? Why do you recommend it?
Yeah, I love that question. And I actually have to give credit to my coworker, Alexandra Sunderland, because she taught me about it. And basically, a hype document is a place where you keep track of all your accomplishments and also positive feedback from your manager and your coworkers. So there's two reasons why I recommend people do this. First, it's a boost of motivation every time you go to that document and you read all the amazing things that you've written in the past, right? It's also a great way to keep track of your accomplishments, and it makes you feel good every time you go there and track one more. But then it's also an excellent way to keep track of all the things that you're doing well and the things that, for example, your coworkers, your manager are saying about you for, let's say, a moment when you want to negotiate your salary or even for performance reviews. Then you won't have to go back and actually think about all the things you've done. You have this hype document where you're already keeping track of all the great things you're doing. So I started doing it like 2 years ago when I joined Fellow, thanks to Alexandra's recommendation. And honestly, it's been a great way to just stay motivated. Sometimes when I'm feeling a little bit down, we all have those days. I look back at that document and I tell myself like, wow, I've accomplished all these things, or my manager, my coworkers, the CEO has said these amazing things about me, and it makes me feel good about myself.
Awesome. It's a fantastic idea. And I think especially in the midst of the pandemic, when I think we're all feeling probably a little less cheery, I am definitely, I want to create my own version of a hype
Yeah.
document.
And
Um,
most companies have performance reviews, right? At the end of the year or every couple of months. So that saves you a lot of time of thinking like, oh, what did I do this, past quarter? Or what did I do this year? What do I want to highlight for my boss when they ask me like, what are you proud of? So yeah, it's a great practice and I highly recommend doing it.
Absolutely. One follow-up question is,
Mhm.
how do you structure your hype document, especially
Oh,
as it goes over time?
that is a really, really good question. So I actually use Fellow, like our own software, to do it. And I'm just going to check my own Hype document right now. So the first section is things you did that are awesome, basically moments and accomplishments that you feel proud of. So I've written random things there, such as being interviewed at a really cool podcast, or designing our entire team meetings guide. Or a very cool moment was when I got Julie Sue, who is the author of The Making of a Manager, to write the foreword for one of our ebooks. Like that was like a huge accomplishment for me in 2020. So I wrote it there. So the first section is just like things you did that were awesome. The second section is projects you worked on. And this is just to keep track of big projects that made an impact on the company or made a big impact on your team. Um, that then later on you can bring up right at those important conversations like performance reviews. So for example, in 2020 I launched or I helped launch the Super Managers podcast. That was a huge project that I'm very proud of. So I wrote it there. I also wrote the name of our ebooks that we launched in 2020, for example. So that's section number two. Section number three is obstacles you overcame. So any obstacle that you thought, you know what, I'm not going to be able to do this, but you ended up doing it. You can write that there. For example, for me, I wrote staying focused and productive during a global pandemic. That I think is an accomplishment for everyone. And then the last section is just feedback and positive recognition from your peers. So you could write, for example, if your manager tells you like, "Hey, you did a really great job at X," I go here and I write it down so I don't forget about that positive feedback. Or if a coworker sends me a Slack message saying like, "Thank you so much for your help, you're awesome," I copy and paste it here as well.
Awesome. That is great advice, and definitely a great tip for people to action. So one next question is in researching this podcast, I've noticed this for a long time is
Yeah.
you do an amazing job on Twitter. I think that
Oh,
you
thank
you
you.
you you do a great job of conveying your personality I think creating a really strong kind of personal brand for yourself. So one question I have is, what advice do you have for people are looking to grow their professional network via
Yeah.
Twitter? And how do you think Twitter can be an effective tool?
Yeah, that's a great question, Scott, and thank you. I appreciate the kind words because I'm trying. I think Twitter, the most important thing is to really build connections, not just worry about the number of followers that you have, right? Like that's not the point. If you join Twitter and you start connecting with people on a certain topic. So, for example, for me, it's been connecting with a lot of marketers and people in the startup ecosystem. So you can start following them, reacting to their content, commenting on their posts, sometimes even messaging them. Sometimes I find someone who's super interesting and I message them and I say, hey, I love what you're doing at company X. I'd love to learn more so I can do it at Fellow, right? So I think building connections. But there's also some ways to start building those connections. So something I actually hadn't heard of before was the concept of Twitter chats. And my manager, Erin Blasky, she is a Twitter queen. Like if you want to follow someone on Twitter, you need to follow Erin because she really knows what she's doing. And she actually introduced the concept of Twitter chats to Fellow, and that's why we created our Twitter chat called Manager Chats. So basically, I've noticed that a lot of companies host Twitter chats. For example, if you're in marketing, you could follow SEM Rush. They have a monthly Twitter chat. Sprout Social, I think, also has a Twitter chat. So you can join these Twitter chats and interact with other people and answer the questions posted by these companies. And it's a great way to also make connections on Twitter. So I think the important thing is to build real connections, like message people, interact with their content, and get involved in conversations. And I think these Twitter chats are actually a pretty helpful way to get involved.
Agreed. That's fantastic advice. And I think
Yeah.
Twitter is often a overlooked vehicle for
Oh
a
my
lot of
God,
people.
yes. For us, it's been huge. Like, I think that some people are, I don't know, in my perspective, like more approachable on Twitter. So, for example, this story I was telling you about, Julie Su is the former VP of product at Facebook, and she wrote the book, The Making of a Manager. So, one day on Twitter, she posted, before publishing the book, she said, hey, I'm writing this book. I need people to give me feedback on the book. And I messaged her. I was like, I don't know if she's going to send me a copy of the book. And I messaged her. I was like, hey, I'm super passionate about management. We write about it. I'd be happy to provide feedback. And she sent me a copy of her book before it was published. So those like little moments and opportunities, I think they only happen on Twitter. Like I don't see them happening on other social media platforms. So that was one for us that I will always remember.
I agree. I think platforms like obviously Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram, it's way harder to actually grab the attention of of like a high profile person
Mm-hmm.
versus Twitter. I mean, it's still challenging depending on the
Yeah,
level of profile of the person. But there's a phenomenal opportunity to meaningfully engage with people. So anyway,
I
awesome,
agree.
awesome work based on
Oh,
your
thank
Twitter
you.
feed.
And one more tip, if anyone here like listening is in marketing, there's actually a very active community right now. If you use the hashtag marketing Twitter, like you'll have like 20 marketers react to your post in like minutes. So the marketing Twitter community is actually very active.
That's great advice, and
Yeah.
definitely recommend listeners check it out.
Yeah.
So at this point, we're going to transition to the more like the formal kind of questions.
Mm-hmm.
But thanks for sharing those comments, Manuela.
Of
So
course.
just to get things started, I'm going to do the formal intro. So welcome, Manuela, to a new wave of entrepreneurship. We are so grateful to have you here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Scott. Thanks for having me. This is very exciting.
Awesome. We hope that you're having a happy new year and a great start to 2021. Before we get into the nitty gritty of some of the questions, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Of course. So if we haven't met yet, for the listeners, my name is Manuela Bárcenas, and I'm a content marketing manager at Fellow.app. And Fellow is a software company that helps managers and their teams run productive meetings and exchange feedback. And as Scott might maybe talk a little bit more about, I'm actually a Venture for Canada alumni. So I found my job at Fellow thanks to Venture for Canada, and I couldn't be more thankful.
Awesome. Thanks, Manuel. We're so thankful and appreciative of you being part of the Venture for Canada community. And many fellows since then have come into the program through Manuela's recommendations. So thanks for the kind words, Manuela, and back at you. So my first question is, how, on the theme of kind of management, is how can a manager make the transition from being a boss to a coach?
Yeah, so in my work as a content marketing manager at Fellow, I have to do a lot of research on management, right? And we actually interview a lot of people, throughout the year. And we did have a manager chat. So one of these Twitter chats that I was telling you about this transition from manager to coach, because I feel that people our age expect a lot from their managers. Like they don't want to have a manager who is just a boss giving them instructions and telling them what to do. We want managers who coach us on our skills and who can help us develop and grow professionally, right? So if you're a manager and you want to help employees develop and grow professionally, if you want to become a coach, I think the most important thing you can do is actually have these career conversations, right? Like ask people on your team, what are your career goals? Where do you see yourself in 3 years? How can they help you get there, right? So if someone on your team tells you, my dream would be to lead a team, for example, then you can start helping that person develop certain leadership skills, so they can get there in the future, right? So I think it's just important to remember people want managers who can really coach them on their skills and help them with their professional future. And if you're a manager, this is something you should always keep in mind. And of course, use feedback as a tool to always help the person. So if someone tells you their goal, maybe whenever you have constructive feedback for them, you can always tie it back to that goal, right? Like, okay, I want to help you become that person. If you want to get to that level, I think you need to be doing X and Y, right?
Yeah, those are great points. As a follow-up, what do you
Mm-hmm.
think are the biggest mistakes that managers tend to make?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the mistake number one, especially in a remote world, would be to forget that there's an actual human behind the screen. Like this is something we've heard a lot from our community. Like a lot of managers are delegating tasks, maybe just like checking in on their teams to see if they're doing the work, but they're not actually asking them about their well-being. Like, hey, like how is it going with you and your family? Like maybe their kids are home, maybe they need to like rearrange their work schedule because they have other priorities. So I think one common mistake nowadays that most of us are working from home is not asking these questions like, hey, how can I support you? Like, do you need anything? Does anything need to change for you to be successful, right? And I think another common mistake is also related to not asking about the employees' motivations. So, one of my favorite interviews in our podcast, Super Managers, was Sarah Varney, who is the CMO at Twilio. And she said that some people are motivated by money and some people are motivated by, building like a family, and maybe their job is like a tool to do that. And maybe some people are really motivated by career advancement and becoming a manager. So as a manager or team lead, you really need to ask those questions to help yourself understand what motivates each person on your team. And if someone is really motivated by salary, then you can motivate them through that, right? But if someone is really motivated by professional challenges and new opportunities, maybe you can motivate them like that. So I think one common mistake that we see is managers trying to manage everyone like with the same management style, when people actually have different motivations, different personalities, and as a manager you need to ask those questions to help you get to know them.
Agreed. I've found that too. Every person is unique, and
Yeah,
every person requires a slightly different management
I'm
style.
sure you've experienced this at Venture for Canada, right? Like every person requires different things and every person is motivated by different things.
Absolutely, I have definitely found that myself. One following up on one thing you said, Manuela, is, and I completely agree. I think it's super important that managers and their reports build strong personal relationships. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of research that shows, for instance, trust is much more likely to take place when people like each other personally, which
Hmm.
is intuitive, but it's good to see that it's backed
Yeah.
up by research. A related question is, how, especially in this remote world that we're currently operating in, what tips do you have for managers in how they can build that positive kind of personal rapport and kind of friendly relationship with
Yeah.
their direct reports,
Yeah.
especially in the context of some cases they've never met their direct reports ever
Yeah.
in person.
I think the most important thing a manager can do is, like, as soon as they, for example, let's say you're a manager and you're starting at a new company, schedule recurring one-on-one meetings with each person on your team. Like, you might have seen Fellow, like at Fellow, we're huge advocates of one-on-one meetings because we actually think they are one of the tools managers have to really develop this trust with their teammates, right? So I'm going to give you an example. When I joined Fellow, I was reporting directly to Aiden, who is the CEO. And every 2 weeks, we had a one-on-one meeting where we just talked about my professional development, maybe challenges that I was encountering, maybe feedback that I had about processes or the company. And this really built a strong, strong relationship with him, to the point that I felt very confident to share feedback with him, even tell him like, hey, you said this the other day and I didn't agree with it very much, but this is why, and this is what I think we should do about it. And I think if managers don't have those frequent one-on-one meetings to talk to people, then that trust won't be there. And I have the same relationship now with Erin, who is my manager now. We have a meeting every 2 weeks where I build the agenda as the direct report. I come prepared with all the things I want to talk to her about. And I think if we didn't have those meetings, I wouldn't have the trust to have those awkward and difficult conversations that sometimes you need to have at work.
Absolutely. And trust is as one person once said to me, things only move at the speed of trust.
Yeah.
And it's so important. So that's great advice,
It's
Manuela.
important. It's important in startups too, right? I know a lot of our listeners are probably in the startup world, and in startup, like, things need to move fast, and you cannot wait to, like, maybe like share feedback with your manager or share feedback with someone on your team, because you might be delaying a process, or we like to call them like feedback loops. Like, the more you communicate, the more feedback loops you're gonna create in your company.
Absolutely. One a kind of related question
Yeah.
around management is, what tips do you have for managers in writing and doing annual performance reviews?
Yeah, this is a really good question because everyone has to go through this process, right? So, first of all, I would encourage people to create a document that we talked about before, like a Hive document where they keep track of their accomplishments. But something that I learned from Alexandra Sunderland, which I'm going to mention again, an engineering manager at Fellow, is that she keeps track of her direct reports accomplishments. So she has a document where she keeps track of, like, the great things that her team has done, as well as some moments where maybe she has shared constructive feedback with them, right? So she keeps track of that. And then when performance reviews come, it won't be hard for you as a manager to prepare, because you already have this document with all the good things that the person did and also the things that they could work on for the future. So I think preparing like that is my number one tip. And obviously, make it a two-way conversation. So I know a lot of managers make the mistake of showing up to these performance reviews and telling people, this is what you did right, this is what you did wrong, and that's it. But something we like to do at Fellow is, our own software has like a tool where you can ask for feedback, right? So in our case, I'm going to give you a specific example. My manager sends me a feedback form about myself, and then she fills in that form with, about her direct reports. So when we show up to the performance review, we've all answered the same questions, and that makes it a two-way conversation because I've already thought about it, right?
Yeah, that's great. At Venture for Canada, we follow a similar process. And by the way, from a manager perspective, I also am a big fan of that, keeping a running track through the year, because it's easy to forget about different things as they kind of come up, both constructive
Yeah.
and good. And it's great to have. It's also a way to, yeah, I think otherwise it's really easy for performance reviews to become very biased to how the person did in the previous
Yeah.
month.
In the context of performance reviews, this is called recency bias.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is a powerful bias in many different things, but definitely in particular in performance reviews.
Yeah.
Even what
Yeah.
happened the day before, right?
Yeah. Let's
Yeah,
say someone like was having a tough week the week before their performance review, like they did something that's wrong. If you as a manager weren't keep track of all these awesome accomplishments, maybe you could be like a little biased in the moment of having this conversation. But if you're actually keeping track of all the good things as well as the constructive feedback, then it's a more balanced and fair conversation.
Absolutely. So, just kind of shifting gears to a next topic is we're going to talk about habits. And one person who I realized we have a shared fondness for is James Clear and his
Yes.
book Atomic Habits, which highly recommend. It is a amazing book.
Yeah.
So, my first question to you is, what were your main takeaway, or what are your main takeaways from reading Atomic Habits
Yeah.
that you think our listeners should know about?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're a fan of James Clear because I love Atomic Habits. I love his newsletter, which is another great resource if people want to check it out. Every Thursday, he writes some really great emails. But yeah, Atomic Habits seriously has been one of those books that really changed my mindset. And I think my favorite takeaway is the concept of identity-based habits. So basically telling yourself, I am the type of person that does X, instead of, for example, saying, oh, I want to lose weight in 2021. Like, no, that's a very like short-term goal. If you tell yourself, I am the person who works out every morning, or I am the type of person who takes care of their body, then your habits are more likely to last, right? Because it's not like a short-term goal. You're actually building an identity. So for myself, like the fitness identity has worked really well. Like when I started telling myself, I am someone who takes care of their own health and who will exercise every morning to start the day, right? It's not about how I look or the weight or, stuff like that, but it's about who you are. And it's also really worked very well for like my reading habits. Like I'm the type of person who is always learning.
Absolutely, those are great. And on the sharing my own personal experience about
Yeah.
the exercise one is up until maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I was around 40 pounds heavier than I am now. And one of the things I did was this is before James Clear, but this is partly why his book resonated with me, is I
Yeah.
adopted a thing where I said 6 days a week I will exercise I will exercise 6 days a week. And I actually have a laminated thing on my wallet, which I've carried since
Oh.
2013 in my wallet, which has a few other things in it. But one of it says, I will exercise 6 times a week. And it's this, and now I think my partner sometimes thinks I'm fanatic about it because we'll be, have to leave somewhere at like, 6:30 in the morning. I'll wake up like at 4 a.m. because it's the only time, but
You
it's because it's part of
exercise.
my identity, right? Like I
Yeah.
feel like I'm failing myself if
Yeah.
I don't do it.
And it's even
Um,
better if you tell others about it, right? Because now you feel like you're failing yourself and other people. So yeah, James Clear talks about habit trackers and like just keeping track of your habits. So I created a private Instagram account where only like my maybe 5 best friends follow me. And every time I work out, I post a picture of my Apple Watch. And that's my habit tracker. And it's worked so well for me because now I feel like not only I have this identity towards myself, but also like my group of like 5 best friends who see these pictures every day, right?
That's a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
I really like that. And it's a great way to keep in touch with your closest,
With your
friends,
closest
particularly if they
friends.
live in different places.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's a really, really good idea. One, I guess, related question, kind of beyond sort of fitness, what are other habits that you're currently working to develop?
Yeah. One that I actually want to develop this year is to build a habit of learning more about content marketing specifically. Like, I want to specialize in this field. So, I want to make it a habit to read about it and to actually spend time building my skills. You know what I mean? So, I want to build a habit of at least once a week, I sit down and I only consume content on content marketing. So it's a habit that I'm starting this year, and I build like a little habit tracker on Excel, like an Excel spreadsheet. We'll see how that goes, but I'm gonna be keeping track of that every week. And here's a fun fact for anyone who has one-on-one meetings with their manager. This is something else you can do. So at Fellow, we're huge advocates of using one-on-one meetings for professional development. So I told my manager, Erin, like every 2 weeks when we have our one-on-one meeting, I'm going to share with you 2 or 3 lessons about content marketing that I've learned in the past 2 weeks. So that's going to keep me accountable to stick to that goal.
On the topic of books and kind of
Yeah.
learning, and you seem like a kind of a voracious learner, and there's the term, was it autodictat, like somebody who loves like
Yeah.
teaching themselves new things. I definitely think you fall in that category. What are some other books that you recommend our listeners check out, and why?
Oh yeah, there is a book. I don't know if people will see a video of this ever, but there's a book I have right here with me. It's called Mindset by Carol Dweck. And this is another book that seriously changed my life. It's a very simple concept, but just like changing your mindset to thinking any skill or any characteristic can be developed through practice and is not set in stone. Just having that mindset can really change your perspective on anything. So it can change your perspective at work, because now you know that you can develop any skill at work. It can also help your relationships, because you know that with communication, you can improve anything in your relationships. So I think it's a great book for anyone who wants to check it out. Have you read it, Scott?
I have not read the specific book, but I have
Mhm.
read excerpts, and I am definitely familiar with growth mindset theory, and of which, for our listeners, for context, is that
Mhm.
it you know, in her research, she found that children who have growth mindset is a greater predictor of kind of success than like IQ and a lot of other kind of variables. In essence, that if you, for instance, a lot of people will say, "Oh, I'm bad at math," right? Like
Yeah.
in school. But if you reframe it to say, I can make myself better at math, then that is a bigger predictor of success than a lot of other things. Is that a good way
Yeah.
to describe it, Manuel?
Yeah, for sure. It's just like the idea that you can get better at anything with dedication, practice, the right strategies, and mentors. Like you can get better at anything you want, right? And I think for me, this concept of the growth mindset has helped a lot. When sometimes at work you get feedback from your manager or someone else, and some people, or as Carol Dweck explains in the book, people with a fixed mindset take it too personally, right? And they're too harsh on themselves, because they would think, oh, I'm so bad at this, or I suck, you know? But people with a growth mindset take feedback in a way that is like beneficial to their growth, because they take it as something that can help them. So if someone gives me feedback, I just take a look at it and think, you know what, if this person is giving me feedback, is because they see the potential in me to get better. And with dedication and learning, I can get to that next level, right? So I think that growth mindset can change a lot how you view feedback at work as well.
Absolutely. There's a great interview with Toby Luque, the founder of Shopify,
Hmm.
that Tim Ferriss did. And in it, Toby Luque says the line, "Feedback is a gift." And I think that
Hmm.
that is such a powerful, you know, sometimes when receiving feedback, it's really tough. But if you view
Hmm.
each piece of feedback as kind of like a present, recognizing it's actually really hard for the person, it's easier for somebody not to give feedback.
Yeah,
Uh, so yeah, that's
yeah,
great. And
it's true.
great advice. Oh, you.
And I think it's so important to like for managers to learn how to give feedback, right? To like maybe ask the other person, is it the right time to share some feedback with you, you know, or maybe like warn them, like, hey, at our one-on-one meeting today, I would love to talk about what happened yesterday when you made mistake X, and how we can move forward and improve for the future, right? Like just like warn people that you want to give them some feedback. That's a good practice. So I think it comes from like from each side. Like managers should learn how to give feedback more effectively, and people should also learn how to receive feedback, and like you said, take it as a gift.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Uh, one kind of sort of final question is,
Hmm.
uh, if you could go back in time and give advice to your 22-year-old self, what advice would you give, and why?
First advice: joint venture for Canada. But I did that. So no, really, just like start earlier. So a lot of things in marketing I've actually learned on the job. Like you said, just like teaching myself how to do certain things and looking online and learning from other people online. So if I could if I could talk to my like 22-year-old self, I would tell her, just start early, start learning about marketing if that's something you're interested in online. Follow people on Twitter who are tweeting about marketing all the time. Follow people in the space, and also start building your, if you're passionate about building your personal brand and networking with people, start doing that early. You don't need to graduate university to do this. Like, you can start building your website, have your own blog, start interacting with people on Twitter and LinkedIn. So that's something I would tell myself, just like start early, because at the end of the day, we're all learning as we go. And I've learned to be a marketer, not because I went not because I went to school for marketing, but because I've learned a lot of the things I know in the process. So yeah, I would tell myself that.
Absolutely. And it's funny on TikTok and
Yeah.
different things. It's pretty remarkable to see like 16-year-olds and like
Yeah.
15-year-olds who are very entrepreneurial and building kind of these
Yeah.
huge online
And on,
platforms.
yeah, Instagram and even Twitter, and I see them and I'm like, good for you, because I wish I did that earlier. And I'm sure that those people at the age of 30 are going to have like huge followings, communities that they're a part of, and probably like their own businesses. So I think start early is a good one. And people nowadays have a lot of tools to do that. Like, you don't even need a website. You could start with Medium, like medium.com. You could start a blog there, and you don't even need to build your own website. So yeah, I would start earlier. I want to launch my personal blog this year very soon. So that's a goal that I have for myself, but I wish that I did it even before graduating university.
I agree. It's a great, and as to throw in a related recommendation is,
Yeah.
particularly if somebody has a unique name. Speaking as one of the only Scott Sturts in the world,
Yeah.
I highly recommend going into GoDaddy or whatever. Buy
Yeah.
your name at .com, .ca, whatever. It's a great resource to have. And then, I mean, even if you don't create a website immediately, it's good to own your domain name,
Your domain
and
name. I agree with you.
it's a great tool, and it's easier today to launch a website than ever before. So that's fantastic advice, Manuela. So just to kind of close off, I just want to say a big thank you to you, Manuela. It's you are such a positive, disciplined, creative
Thank you,
person.
Scott.
It's going to be really exciting to see as your career continues to grow and develop. And I think you provided a ton of really interesting insights today, both to me and to our listeners. So at this point, can you share to our listeners where they can find you and contact and learn more about you and your work?
For sure. So you can find me on basically any social media platform: Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, as Manuela Bárcenas. And when this episode airs, I'm 100% sure that my website will be live. So you can just type manuelabarcenas.com, and you can also contact me through that. So I look forward to connecting with more people, people that are interested in Venture for Canada, people that are interested in the startup ecosystem, or simply people that are interested in habits like I am. So looking forward to that.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Manuela. I wish you all the best through the rest of 2021. And thanks so much for coming on today, and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks for having me, Scott.